Many years ago, in a busy corner of Port Harcourt, stood a compound that looked like it had swallowed too many stories and refused to digest them. The building was long and narrow. The paint color was a tired yellow that had faded under the stubborn sun, and every room faced another room. People in the area called it Okoro Compound, not because it was beautiful or peaceful, but because the owner, Madam Okoro, ruled the place like a woman who believed landlords were representatives from heaven, and the entire earth had been temporarily lent to tenants. Madam Okoro was a widow in her late 50s, with sharp eyes that could detect unpaid rents the way a police dog detects cocaine. She had a voice that could travel from the back of the compound to the front gate without needing transport fare, and her wrapper was always tied tight around her waist as if it had signed a lifetime contract. Madam Okoro had rules, many rules that nobody understood, rules that changed depending on the mood of Madam Okoro, rules that tenants obeyed the way people obey traffic officers with large stomachs and dark sunglasses. One of those rules said nobody should play loud music after 7 in the evening. Another rule said visitors should not sleep over unless Madam Okoro had been informed 2 weeks earlier. Another rule said nobody should hang clothes on the fence because the fence is not a fashion runway. But the strangest rule in the compound concerned something nobody expected. Madam Okoro did not like tenants with fine faces. If a woman looked too beautiful, Madam Okoro's blood pressure would rise like bread inside hot oven. Unfortunately, nobody knew why. The matter started like a joke. At first, the tenants thought it was a coincidence. Then, they realized it was a pattern. A woman would move in looking like someone who moisturized with peace of mind, only for Madam Okoro to begin behaving as if the woman had stolen her pension within 2 months. One afternoon, the tenants gathered under the mango tree in the compound where gossip usually held staff meetings. Sitting there were 3 permanent members of the compound parliament. First was Mama Zuberi, a short woman whose ears were so trained for gossip that she once heard a quarrel from 2 streets away and correctly predicted the outcome before sunset. Second was Ogenekome, a quiet but observant tailor who observed life the way scientists observe insects. Third was Chibunachi, a university student who believed every compound drama deserved a documentary. Mama Zuberi slapped her thigh that afternoon and declared loudly, "This woman does not like fine girls." Ogenekome looked up from the clothes she was cutting. "What happened again?" Mama Zuberi leaned forward seriously like a news anchor. "Did you not hear about what happened to that hairdresser?" Chibunachi adjusted her glasses with excitement. "You mean the one with long Brazilian hair?" "Yes," Mama Zuberi said, "that one." The hairdresser's name had been Temilara. Temilara had moved into the compound 6 months earlier. She worked at a salon in town. She spoke softly and smiled often. She looked like someone whose face had a personal relationship with sunlight. However, within 3 weeks of her arrival, strange complaints began. Madam Okoro said Temilara's beauty was disturbing the compound environment. The tenants laughed when they first heard it. They thought Madam Okoro was joking, but Madam Okoro never jokes. One evening, she called Temilara outside and spoke loudly enough for every room to hear. "Young lady, too many men are entering this compound because of you." Temilara blinked in confusion. "Madam, they are not visiting me." Madam Okoro folded her arms. "Your face is the magnet. The men are the iron." Mama Zuberi nearly choked on granuts that day. Another tenant named Itelema, who sold cooked beans in front front of the compound whispered to Chibunachi, "Did she just blame somebody's face for male traffic in the compound?" But Madam Okoro did not laugh. She was serious like unpaid school fees. 2 weeks later, she increased Temilara's rent, just like that. When Temilara protested, Madam Okoro said something that later became compound history. "This compound is not a beauty pageant." 2 months later, Temilara packed her bags and peace returned for a while until another lady moved in. Her name was Serafina. Serafina sold perfumes at the shopping center in town. She walked like someone who trusted the earth not to embarrass her. Her skin shone the way ripe pawpaw shines in the markets. Mama Zuberi looked at her on the first day and shook her head. Trouble has entered room number 6. Within 2 months, Madam Okoro began inspection visits that looked like police raids. "Why are you smiling at the mechanic outside?" she asked Serafina one morning. Serafina blinked. "I was just greeting him." Madam Okoro shook her head slowly. Greeting leads to friendship. Friendship leads to confusion. Nobody even understood the mathematics. Eventually, Serafina also left the compound, and the pattern continued like that. Each time a beautiful woman moved in, Madam Okoro would behave as if someone had delivered a snake into her kitchen. That afternoon, under the mango tree, Mama Zuberi sighed deeply. "This matter is not ordinary," Ogenekome said. "So what exactly is the problem?" Mama Zuberi lowered her voice like someone discussing national security. "Madam Okoro believes beauty attracts disaster." Chibunachi burst into laughter. "Then why does she keep mirrors in her house?" Mama Zuberi pointed her finger in the air. "Young girl, don't joke about a woman who controls your electricity meter." Oh. Just then, the compound caretaker walked past. His name was Bodunrin. He was a thin man with sharp eyes who had worked in the compound for almost 10 years. Bodunrin knew every tenant story. He also knew many things that nobody asked. Mama Zuberi called him. "Bodunrin, come here." He stopped. "What happened?" Mama Zuberi folded her arms. "Tell us the truth. Why does Madam Okoro chase beautiful women away?" Bodunrin looked at them for a long moment. His face looked like that of someone who had seen enough drama to open a cinema hall. Finally, he spoke. "Madam Okoro does not hate beauty." The women leaned forward. "So what does she hate?" Chibunachi asked. Bodunrin sighed. "She fears it." Mama Zuberi frowned. "What does that mean?" Bodunrin shook his head. "One day, you people will understand." Then he walked away. The women looked at each other in silence. Mama Zuberi scratched her head. "That man talks like a prophet that forgot the rest of the message." Ogenekome continued cutting her clothes silently while Chibunachi laughed and adjusted the small stool she was sitting on. The afternoon sun hung heavily above the compound, causing heat to spread across the cement floor as if someone had poured hot soup on it. From one room, a baby was crying. From another room, someone was pounding pepper with a kind of strength that suggested anger. Life inside Okoro compound always moved with noise. Mama Zuberi leaned forward again and said, "I am telling you people, that caretaker knows something." Chibunashi shrugged. "All these elders just like to talk in riddles. If he knows something, he should say it plainly now." Ogenekome finally lifted her head. "Sometimes people refuse to say certain things because it is not their story to tell." Mama Zuberi waved her hand dismissively. "Story or no story, that woman still needs deliverance." Just then, the compound gate made a loud metallic sound. Everyone looked up. A small taxi had stopped outside. The driver stepped out first and opened the trunk. Then, a young woman came out of the back seat. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a medium-sized travel bag. Nothing about her clothes was loud. Nothing about her posture was dramatic, but the moment she stood upright, the entire compound seemed to pause for 1 second. She was beautiful. Not the noisy type of beauty that enters a room and begins to perform. Her beauty was quiet and confident, like someone who had no reason to prove anything. Mama Zuberu's mouth slowly opened. Chibunachi fully turned on her stool. Oh no! Ogenekome stopped cutting clothes completely. This compound will not survive this. The young woman paid the driver and looked around the compound carefully. Her eyes were curious and she walked toward the compound confidently. Mama Zuberu whispered like someone watching a horror film. Does she know where she has come? Chibunachi shook her head. Hi, poor girl. At that moment, Madame Okoro appeared from the corridor like a storm cloud that had been waiting for the right weather. She had been watering the small plants near her window. Now, she stood straight and stared at the newcomer with a long, silent gaze. Her eyes scanned the woman from head to toe. The young woman smiled politely. Good afternoon, ma. Madame Okoro did not return the smile immediately. Who are you looking for? She asked in a voice that sounded like a police checkpoint. My name is Abeni, the young woman replied calmly. I came about the room that was advertised. Mama Zuberi slapped her thigh. Aha! Room number 4. Madame Okoro continued looking at Abeni's face like someone inspecting a suspicious package. You are the one that called yesterday? Yes, ma, Abeni nodded. Silence followed. The tenants watched from different corners of the compound like people observing a football match. Even the children had slowed down their running. Madame Okoro folded her arms. 2 months' rent in advance. The compound gasped. Mama Zuberi leaned towards Chibunachi. 2 months? That woman usually collects 1 month first. Chibunachi whispered back. She has seen the face now. Abeni did not even argue. She simply nodded. That is fine. Madame Okoro blinked slightly. She had expected negotiation or complaints. Instead, this young woman spoke with acceptance. Madame Okoro cleared her throat. Also, there are rules. I understand, Abeni nodded. You must not entertain male visitors late at night. I understand, Abeni nodded again. You must not create disturbance. Abeni nodded. I understand. Madame Okoro's voice hardened slightly. And if any trouble comes because of you, I will not tolerate it. Abeni nodded again. I will keep to myself. Mama Zuberi leaned back in amazement. Hey, this one is peaceful. Ogenekome whispered. That is how trouble begins. Madame Okoro finally gestured towards the corridor. Room number 4 over there. Bodunri appeared suddenly with a key. He handed it to Abeni without speaking much, but his eyes studied her face curiously. Thank you, she said. He nodded. Then she carried her bag toward the room. As she passed the tenant, she smiled politely again. Good afternoon, everyone. Mama Zuberi responded quickly. Good afternoon, my daughter. Chibunashi waved. Welcome. Ogenekome gave her a small nod. Abeni entered room number 4 and closed the door gently. For 2 full seconds, the compound remained quiet. Then Mama Zuberi slowly turned towards the others. This compound is finished. Chibunashi laughed. Why? Mama Zuberi pointed towards Madame Okoro's window. Look. They all looked. Madame Okoro stood behind her curtain watching room number 4 like a security guard guarding a bank vault. Ogenekome spoke. Hey, she has started. From that day, something strange began inside Okoro compound. Madame Okoro started appearing everywhere. If Abeni came out to fetch water, Madame Okoro would suddenly appear near the tap. If Abeni swept her front space, Madame Okoro would walk past slowly with folded arms. If Abeni returned from work, Madame Okoro would be standing near the staircase pretending to adjust flower pots. Mama Zuberi observed the situation like a scientist studying a rare insect. One evening, she whispered to Chibunachi, that woman is monitoring beauty as if it is a dangerous weapon. Chibunachi giggled. Maybe she believes beauty has expired unnecessary dates now. Ogenekome shook her head slowly. This one will not end well, oh. 1 week passed and then the complaints began. One afternoon, Madam Okoro knocked loudly on Abeni's door. Abeni opened it politely. Yes, ma. Madam Okoro pointed toward the corridor. Why are men greeting you in front of this compound? Abeni blinked in confusion. They greet everyone. That mechanic greeted you first, Madam Okoro said. No, he greets everybody first, Abeni insisted. Madam Okoro's face tightened. You must be very, very careful. Abeni nodded peacefully. I will. Later that day, Mama Zuberi told the compound parliament. She accused the girl of greeting. Chibunachi laughed so hard that she almost fell from her stool. But the laughter slowly faded because one person inside the compound was not laughing, bothering the caretaker. He stood near the gate that evening watching Abeni return from work. She greeted him politely. Good evening. He nodded. Good evening. Then he looked towards Madam Okoro's balcony where the landlady stood watching again. Bothering sighed to himself. History is walking back into this compound. He shook his head slowly and turned back to the small wooden stool beside the gate where he usually sat every evening. From there, he could see almost everything that happened in Okoro compound. Years of watching Tenant had turned him into something like a human security camera. Inside the compound, the usual evening activities began. Pots knocked against stoves. Someone fried plantain near the corridor. And as usual, Mama Zuberi carried a small plastic chair outside and sat down confidently like a woman who knew that compound life would never lack entertainment. Chibunachi soon joined her. You are here again, Chibunachi said. Mama Zuberi looked offended. My daughter, if you live in this compound and you don't sit outside, how will you understand your neighbors? Ogenekome arrived shortly after with her sewing baskets and sat quietly beside them. Mama Zuberi lowered her voice and began. Have you people noticed something? Chibunachi smiled. That Madam Okoro watches that girl like immigration officer, right? Mama Zuberi snapped her fingers. Exactly. Ogenekome nodded. She does not trust her. But the girl has done nothing now, Chibunachi said. Mama Zuberi leaned forward. That is not the point. What is the point then? Chibunachi asked. Mama Zuberi sighed like someone about to deliver wisdom. Sometimes a person does not hate you because of what you did. They hate you because of what someone else did to them. Chibunachi blinked. That sounded deep. Mama Zuberi shrugged. I heard it in a Nollywood film. Just then, Abeni came out of her room with a small bucket to fetch water. She greeted the women politely. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, my daughter, Mama Zuberi replied warmly. Abeni smiled and walked towards the tap. From the balcony, Madam Okoro watched everything with tight eyes. Unfortunately, over the next few weeks, the small pension slowly grew into something bigger. Madam Okoro began finding faults in everything Abeni did. One morning, she complained that Abeni swept too early. Another day, she said Abeni swept too late. Another afternoon, she accused her of attracting too many greetings. The compound women watched the situation like people watching a slow film. One evening, Mama Zuberi shook her head. This woman will not rest. Chibunachi sighed. The girl has not even brought one visitor since she moved in. Ogenekome added, I am convinced now that Madam Okoro is just fighting shadows from her past. Mama Zuberi leaned closer. You people still don't know the story? Chibunachi's eyes widened. What story? Mama Zuberi looked around to make sure Madam Okoro was not nearby. I finally heard it from my cousin who used to live in this compound 15 years ago. Chibunachi leaned forward immediately. What happened? What happened? Mama Zuberi lowered her voice. Madam Okoro's husband was once the pride of this compound. His name had been Chief Okoro, a tall transport businessman who owned several bosses. Money flowed easily through his hands, and the compound respected him because he helped tenants whenever problems came. But Chief Okoro had one weakness. Beautiful women made his sense disappear. Mama Zuberi continued the story slowly. One year, a tenant moved into this compound. Her name was Idara. Idara was young, elegant, and very beautiful. She sold fabrics in the big markets. Men greeted her the way flower greets sunlight. At first, nothing was strange. Chief Okoro only greeted her politely like a landlord greeting a tenant. Then the visit started. Chief Okoro would knock on Idara's door. "Madam, I came to check the leaking pipe." "Madam, I brought you fruits from the market." "Madam, do you need transport to town?" One afternoon, Madam Okoro returned from church earlier than expected, and as she walked through the corridor, she heard laughter from Idara's room. The door was slightly open, so she saw her husband, Chief Okoro, standing inside the room. The compound never forgot what happened next. Madam Okoro screamed such that the sound shook the entire building. Jesus wept! Tenants rushed out of their rooms like people responding to fire alarm. Mama Zuberi demonstrated it as if she had been there. Madam Okoro stood in the corridor pointing at the door. "My husband! My husband!" Chief Okoro came out looking like someone whose brain had stopped working. Idara stood behind him. Madam Okoro shouted again, "Jesus wept in my own compound." The entire building froze that day, and that was the same day shame entered the house of Madam Okoro. Chief Okoro left the compound a few weeks later after endless arguments between them. The marriage never recovered. Unfortunately, within 2 years, he died after a sudden illness. Mama Zuberi finished the story and sighed. Since that day, Madam Okoro began chasing beautiful women away. Ogenekome nodded slowly. That kind of wound does not heal easily now. Chibunachi shook her head. But punishing innocent people is not fair either. Mama Zuberi shrugged. Pain does not allow fairness, so. Meanwhile, Madam Okoro continued watching Abeni like someone guarding a dangerous secret. Then something happened that turned the entire compound upside down. One Saturday morning, a black car stopped outside the compound gates. The car was clean and expensive. Children ran toward it immediately because expensive cars usually meant interesting visitors. Boduri stood up from his stool. The driver opened the back door and a tall young man stepped out. He wore a simple shirt paired with dark trousers and walked like someone who worked in air-conditioned offices. Mama Zuberi stared from her chair. "Who is that?" Ogenekome squinted. That is Madam Okoro's son." Chibunachi's mouth opened. "You mean Ekene?" Mama Zuberi nodded. "Oh, the one that works in Lagos." Ekene rarely visited the compound, but when he did, the entire place suddenly behaved as if it had manners. He greeted Boduri warmly. "Good afternoon." "Welcome, sir," Boduri replied. Ekene walked inside the compound, smiling politely at the tenants. Mama Zuberi waved excitedly. "Welcome, my son." Madam Okoro came out from her room almost immediately when she heard his voice. "Ekene Wam!" She hugged him tightly. "My son, you have come." Ekene laughed. "Yes, Mama." The compound watched them happily. A son visiting his mother always brought temporary peace to Okoro compound. Later that afternoon, Ekene stood outside with the tenants chatting casually. Then he said something that shocked the entire compound. "I will introduce my fiancé tomorrow." Mama Zuberi blinked. "Fiancé?" Ekene nodded proudly. "Yes." Chibunachi whispered. "Hey, this compound will enjoy tomorrow." Madam Okoro beamed with happiness. My son has chosen well." The next day, the compound waited like a cinema hall before a movie begins. Mama Zuberi arranged her chair in the best viewing position. Chibunachi brought granuts. Ogenekome pretended to sew while secretly watching the gates. Then the car arrived. The same black car stopped outside. Ekene stepped out first. Then he opened the door for the woman beside him. She stepped out slowly and the entire compound froze. Mama Zuberi almost dropped her wrapper. Chibunachi stood up as if electric ants beat her laps. Ogenekome removed her glasses in disbelief. Well, that was because the woman standing beside Ekene was Abeni, the same Abeni who rented room number 4. The same Abeni Madam Okoro had been harassing for weeks. Silence swallowed the compound. Mama Zuberi whispered slowly, "Jesus wept again." Nobody laughed or spoke this time around. The compound suddenly became quiet in a way it had never been before. Ekene closed the car door without noticing the tension. He smiled proudly and called out, "Mama, come and meet her." Madam Okoro walked out of the corridor with the confidence of a woman expecting to welcome her future daughter-in-law. But her smile lasted only 2 seconds. When she saw the face of Abeni, the same woman she had accused of attracting men, the same woman she had warned repeatedly, the same woman she had almost chased out of the compound, Madam Okoro froze. Her feet refused to move forward. Ekene looked from his mother to Abeni, confused by the silence. "Mama." Abeni stood calmly beside him. She was holding a small basket of fruits. Her face did not show anger or fear. She simply looked at Madam Okoro the way a person looks at someone who has not yet decided what they want to say. Mama Zuberi leaned towards Chibunachi. "This compound will explode today." Chibunachi whispered back, "Don't breathe too loudly, we are watching history." Ekene smiled again, unaware of the storm. "Mama, this is Abeni, my fiancé." Madam Okoro's lips parted slightly. She knew the name already. The compound waited for the storm. Nobody moved for a minute. Finally, Madam Okoro forced herself to speak. You know each other?" Ekene frowned. "Know each other?" Then slowly the realization dawned on him. "Mama, wait, Abeni, do you know my mother?" Abeni nodded. "Yes, I live here." Ekene looked from one face to another. "You never told me," Abeni replied calmly. "You never asked." Mama Zuberi covered her mouth to stop herself from laughing. Ekene looked confused. "So, you are the tenant my mother mentioned?" Madam Okoro turned sharply. "I mentioned nothing, no," but the entire compound knew that was not true. Ekene's expression slowly changed. Something in the silence began connecting the pieces in his head. He looked at Abeni carefully and asked, "Have there been problems here?" Abeni did not answer immediately. She looked at Madam Okoro. Then she said something simple. "Your mother and I have had conversations." Mama Zuberi whispered loudly. Conversation is such a polite word. Ekene turned to his mother. "Mama." Madam Okoro's face hardened. "This is not the place for the discussion." Ekene shook his head. "No, this is exactly the place." The entire compound leaned closer now. Ekene looked at Abeni again. "Tell me the truth, everything." Abeni spoke on. "Your mother believes beautiful women bring trouble." The words dropped into the compound like a stone into still water. Ekene stared at his mother. "Mama." Madam Okoro folded her arms and shrugged. "I was protecting my house." Ekene laughed. "From what? From my fiancé?" Madam Okoro pointed towards Abeni. "You don't know her." Ekene replied immediately. "Oh, I know her well enough to want to marry her." Silence followed again. The compound women exchanged looks. This was no longer gossip. This was family matter proper. Ekene spoke again. "Mama, have you been harassing her?" Madam Okoro tilted her chin stubbornly. "I just warned her." "Warned her about what?" Ekene asked. "About bringing trouble here." Ekene's voice became sharper now. "Mama, she works in an accounting firm. She comes home quietly every evening. What trouble could she possibly bring? Madam Okoro's voice rose the more. You don't understand. Ekene stepped closer. Then explain it. For a moment, Madam Okoro looked as if she might shout again. But instead, something inside her broke. Her shoulders dropped slightly and her voice lost its force. Your father! The compound became very silent again. Ekene's expression softened slightly. What about him? Madam Okoro looked toward the ground. He brought shame into this compound because of a beautiful tenant. Mama Zuberi exhaled in pride. The old story had returned. Ekene sighed. Mama, that happened many years ago. Madam Okoro looked up painfully. Pain does not follow calendar, my son. Abeni finally stepped forward and said, Ma, I am not the woman who hurt you. That sentence landed cleanly. Madam Okoro looked at her. She really looked at her not as an enemy or as a threat, just as a person. Ekene took a deep breath. Mama, if you chase her away, you will also chase me away. The words were direct. The compound women looked at Madam Okoro nervously. She stood still for a long time. Then she sighed and said, Abeni. Yes, ma, Abeni replied. Madam Okoro cleared her throat. I misjudged you. The compound nearly fainted. Mama Zuberi whispered, write the dates down. Madam Okoro continued, my anger was not about you. I know, Abeni replied. Another long silence followed. Then Madam Okoro said something the compound never expected to hear. You will stay. I accept you. Abeni nodded. I already paid for 2 months. Chibunachi burst into laughter before she could stop herself. Even Ekene smiled. Madam Okoro shook her head slowly. That evening, the compound slowly returned to its usual noise. Children began running again and someone started frying akara near the gates. Mama Zuberi stretched her legs and leaned back in her chair. Well, she said. Ogenekome looked at her. Well, what? Mama Zuberi smiled. Beauty finally won rent control. They both laughed. Thank you for watching the story. Kindly share your thoughts about the story with me in the comments section. Kindly share the story out with your loved ones and give the story a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you've not done so by now. Until I bring another story your way. Bye!